Okay, so in this section we'll talk a little bit about GitHub and Git. Git is the actual system for source code management, source version control, and GitHub is one of the services offered, but it's way the most popular. So it wraps the Git system into a nice website, but Git is still something separate from GitHub. And how Git works, there's commits. All the dots you see here are commits. It's collection of code changes that kind of make sense to go together, that are kind of locked in time. So each of these points are an important, not an important in size, but an important logical unit of a code change that someone saves. And this can be done on different branches. So you can think of it like a tree where you have a trunk, master branch, and then from there comes out smaller branches. The only difference is they're not smaller, so every time you create a new branch, you have the entire copy of that branch, and you can make code changes that start from where you branched and are not affected by other branches. That's cool in itself, but what's even nicer is that you can later merge that back into the branch it came from or into another branch as long as they have something in common at the origin. So this allows to have some different branching strategies, and this is a common one where you have a master branch and you only commit, actually you never commit inside of the master branch. You always merge from some other branch, and you only merge when you have something ready for release. So that's usually what happens when you have a master branch. The develop branch will usually be the one that you actually do your merging in between versions. So you have something complete, okay, it's fine, you merge it here, but you're gonna add other things that you're gonna merge there, another feature, another bug fix, until you're satisfied that it's ready for a new release, a new version number, and then you merge it back into master. Now, the other branches, they're going to be feature branches or bug branches usually, and this is where you're going to be working on a specific subject. So if there's a feature that we want to add, and we may need to make one commit for the API, one commit for the UI that goes with that API, one other commit to fix a bug that you introduced by making this. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 10 commits here that relate to a specific feature or a specific bug until you're satisfied that you can build, that you totally resolved that issue, may it be a feature or a bug, and you can later take that collection of changes and merge it into the development branch. And same thing here for another feature in parallel to this one. So one developer could be working on something and another one on something else. And what's cool with Git is that those two developers could be working on the same file. And Git is intelligent enough to detect conflicts. If while merging there's lines of code that two persons changed, so you can correct that conflict and decide what to do with it. It's not intelligent to the point of taking the decision of what's good and what's wrong, but it's intelligent enough to know that, hey, there could be a conflict here, how you want to resolve this. So that's basically how branching works. Now, some people don't like to have a master and develop branch because Git supports having tags on any branch. So if we take this tag and we move it into this commit, we don't need to have a master branch. So we can have different commits between versions and just put a tag when that commit represents another release. So you're gonna see both cases with master and develop, or with just develop, or with just master. Some people prefer to keep one or keep the other, but just to get familiar with what you'll see in different repositories. And on top of all that, there's one branch that is default, that when you get on the GitHub page, the one that's selected is usually the one where you want to submit your pull requests. No matter how many branches they are, usually the default one, that's an advertisement that you should commit to that one. So if you're not sure, go with whatever is default when you get on the page. Now, this is the URL of the links module, the DNN core links module. So it's going to be github.com / the username or the organization / the name of the repository. And each repository will have the complete code, complete history, all the branches and everything. And you're gonna see on the top of the page a fork button, and the number is how many people have forked that. So forking a repository means that you are taking a full copy of all the code, all the history, all the branches, all the commits, so everything, into your own GitHub account. Okay, so it's still not on your computer. It's still in GitHub, but now it's a full copy under your user account. Because here you have read and write access to this. As the other one, you may only be able to read. You can request access to write, but you might not have it. So you make your own copy, so you can do anything you want here. It won't directly affect where you forked it from. Now, exchanging code changes between those two repositories is done by pull requests. So you see the lines here are dotted. That means you can only pull one way or the other. You can only pull, you cannot push unless you have write access on both. But this guy should not force you to accept his changes, and you should not be able to force the other guy to accept your changes. So a pull request is a suggestion to the other party to pull your changes. So here's what I did. If you like it, you can take it. So don't be surprised if a pull request is refused. It's not an obligation on any part, you know. So if you make something good and the other party accepts it, good, but you cannot force that. Then another step is cloning. So cloning means taking a repository that is on GitHub, on the website, and making a copy on your local machine, on your computer. So that's called cloning. And again, when you clone everything. You clone all the history, the commits, everything. You may not download everything, but all the information to download everything is there, depending on the Git tool that you use. And the relations to make actions in between those two entities, well, you can push and pull as you want. And this is because this is yours and this is yours. And additionally, you can do a fetch. A fetch is similar to a pull, but it doesn't pull any data, it just pulls information. So if there was changes here and you do a fetch, it's gonna show you what's changed and you can decide to pull it or not. That's the only thing different between a fetch and a pull. Now, the relation between the repository, the master repository that we'll later call upstream, is that you cannot push to it unless you have write access, but usually you don't. So you can only pull and you can only fetch. So fetch pulls out the information and pull will actually pull the data, the code changes. And to name them properly, this one that's on your computer is called local. The one that is on the website and that belongs to you, that you have read-write access, that's called your origin. And the other one, the master one, is called upstream. So you have your local, origin, and upstream. Now, if, oops, sorry. If we take a use case, you have this repository which you wanna fix an issue or add a feature or something. In order to do the complete process, you would first fork it if you don't have it already, so that you have your own copy on which you can work on, because your computer can be offline at any time, so we want something that persists. So you fork it into your origin, and you have all the full copy of that. You clone it to your local machine, and then on your local machine, you don't need internet connection anymore. You can work totally standalone on this for days, even if people are concurrently working on it and making commits and merging stuff, and you can be totally disconnected. And here you're gonna make your own branch for whatever subject you're working on, either a feature or a bug. You're gonna do 1 or 2 or 3 commits, and then you're gonna take that branch and you're gonna push it into your own repository. So the branch you would have newly created here will appear on the internet under your name. And since you cannot push here, in order for that person or that organization to know about your changes and eventually merge them into their code, you need to create a pull request. So that's how they're gonna pull this information. Now, after a few days that you will not be working on this, or a few weeks or a few months, your local copy and even your origin copy, the one that's on the web, will be out of date because this would have evolved. So in order to sync back, you cannot pull it. So there's 2 ways to do it. Either you make a pull request on the other direction, so you're gonna suggest taking the changes from this repository into this one, and you're gonna accept yourself your own request. So that's one way to do it if you have to do it on the website. However, doing it this way, you don't see very nicely all the code changes, and you cannot try individual commits and stuff, so that's not the way I suggest to do it. The other way I suggest to do it is to do a fetch on your local machine. So that's going to pull all the information about what changed, and then you can pull these things into your machine. You can test and you can build and you can see what's changed and actually run that in an environment and everything to know, what's the latest change. And when you're happy with that, you can push it back into your origin. So you pull from here and you push from there. So now the 3 parts are in sync. So I'm gonna find a way to have this slide or this whole presentation as a PDF or something. If you're not used to this process, it's a little confusing at first and what steps to do in which order. So try to keep that handy and you'll get an idea of what needs to be done. Okay, so as practical examples, I'm going to be doing 3 pull requests, one for a module, one for the DNN platform repository, and one for the persona bar. So let's start by the easiest. I guess it's a module. So I'm going to do an example with a core module. For those who don't know, core modules are modules that used to come together with DNN, with the installation. Most of them are a bit old, and there have been a lot of efforts to bring them back to life recently. The one I'm going to take as an example is the announcements module, which is a very simple one, just to display announcements on a web page, and you can set when they start showing, when they end showing, a couple different permissions. It's a simple module. If you're totally new to DNN development, I highly suggest to go on the DNN software website in the videos section and scroll down to, by the way, there's a lot of very useful information in these videos, and the development section of those videos, there's a series where you have a part 1, 2, 3, 4. They're a bit old. There's a little bit of stuff that's not the current best practices. It's a web forms module, which is kind of an old technology, but it still works now, and it's a gentle introduction to developing modules. So if you're totally new, I highly suggest that series by Chris Hammond. Go through all the parts. If you notice anything doesn't work now, just continue to the next one, but or ask questions in the forums or something, but it's a good introduction to developing modules. I hope this is renewed shortly with the current best practices, but that's something as a community that we would have to write up. So the core modules are located on the DNN community GitHub. There's core modules and there's other community modules too. So github.com/DNN community. And you're gonna see in the tags here, the ones that have the DNN core module. Those ones were formerly provided with DNN, but there's other community modules as well. So there's a lot of examples if you're looking to get your hands inside of a module and get some examples. So there's a lot of them are core modules, but not all of them, like Captain Hook and these things. There are other community modules. And you can also search GitHub for DNN tag, and you should see a lot of other stuff in other repositories. But for our example, it's going to be a module in this repository. So what we're going to do, for most of them, you clone that to the desktop modules folder of an actual DNN website that you have locally, and you build it. Unless the module notes on GitHub has other instructions, but most of them it's going to be like this. So the steps we're going to do, we're going to fork that repository to our personal GitHub account. We're going to clone it to our local machine, and then we are going to set the upstream branch, because that's not set by default. So when you're going to want to update your repository from upstream, as we've seen here, after a couple days there are going to be changes by other people. So when you want to update that, your local needs to be aware of which repository is the upstream. So we need to set that up. And from there we're gonna build in debug mode and then in release mode. The reason for that is that if you try to build directly in release and the packaging scripts need some NuGet packages, they won't be here unless you build previously in debug mode. So debug's gonna make the first build, get all the dependencies and everything, and then release usually just builds in release mode and packages all that into an installable package. So we want to do both, and then we'll take the result of that and install it. Either if it's a module, we need to install it. If it's a module, or actually it's an extension, because it doesn't have to be a module. It could be a provider for something, it could be an authentication provider, it could be a skin. So basically you want to install that inside of a website. If you're actually working with the DNN core, then you need to build that project, and this is the website you need to install it. And we'll walk through this. And when that is done, you're ready to start. You create a new branch for your topic, whatever you want to do, the bug fix or whatever, usually with the issue number on GitHub. Then you're going to do your changes test, make sure everything builds, everything works as expected, and you will stage and then commit those changes. The staging, we're going to discuss a little bit of that, but basically you're going to be selecting only the files that you actually want to commit. Sometimes it's all of them, sometimes there's some stuff you want to skip, you don't want to commit that for the other people. Usually it's local changes that don't affect the module for other people. And we want to do that by logical steps. So when we have something complete presentable that we want to commit. And then we're going to push that to our origin, which is our repository on GitHub, and create a pull request from there.